Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne here with you on this Tuesday edition of Sidelines. Got a lot to talk about, man. Yesterday was nonstop Final Four from the weekend college basketball. Of course, we got spring practice underway all over the country, college baseball underway. And I got to see David Schultz is going to join his Schultz cast down in Mobile, the Sultan of the Sunbelt. What Charles Barkley said about NIL and the portal and all. He thinks there'll be 25 or 30 schools in the coming years, and that'll be it. And if you don't have the money to invest into NIL, you know, you'll be just left behind. I hope we don't get to that. I personally hate NIL. I don't like the portal. I don't know what it really we've got college sports for a reason. We also have pro sports. I'm against anything that makes college sports more like pro sports. Okay. So just think about it. If you paid your employees up front before they did anything, if on Monday, you think they'd be there Friday? Good luck on that one. You're already seeing NIL. Again, I think the free market's going to work it out, but we got a lot to talk about. Second segment, Dave Tompkins will check in from over in Beaufort, South Carolina, in the Low Country. Will check in with us on update on talking some Masters, Final Four, Kentucky Derby, a lot there. Hour number 2, Tommy Kane checks in from Atlanta. ACC report, get his take. One ACC team, the only Power 5 team from a Power 5 conference in the Final Four, along with San Diego State, Florida Atlantic. You know, in Connecticut. Connecticut is a blue blood. 4 national championships. 6th most ever. That's tied with Kansas. We hear about Kansas all the time. Don't forget about UConn. They play some great basketball. All right, we're here 6 days a week, 2 hours every day, 50 hours plus content per month, www.sidelines.live. Also, 680thefan.com, Podcast Park in Atlanta, Radio Alabama, Sports Radio FM 104.7, Cookeville, Tennessee, up on the plateau. More to come. We're making some moves behind the scenes with Sidelines. This is it's going to be a lot of fun. Countdown to college football is already underway, but let's get with Dave Schultz. And Dave, you were recently up in Syracuse, Q's Nation. Jim Boeheim, he's gone. And I saw something on Twitter last night about one of Syracuse's best players is going into the portal. Again, I know you can benefit from the portal, but it is hard to keep up with the roster, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. Joe Girard, a 4-time scorer, maybe the all-time high school point leader in New York State. Good player. Didn't turn out the way people thought he was going to be. You know, everyone's comparing him to Jerry McNamara, who was one of the all-time great shooters in certainly Syracuse history, if not the NCAA, and just never found the consistency. Really never found the consistency. He showed up. He ended up being the point guard in the last couple of years. They had other guys to do that, and we thought they found his role for him as a shooting guard, and it never materialized. One day he'd score 35, and the next day he'd score nothing.
Yeah.
And, you know, shooters shoot, so he's going to keep on shooting and not making them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. He's going to test out the waters with the NBA, and then if that doesn't work out, he's going to do the transfer portal. So I presume there'll be a place for him because he can shoot. You know, he'll find some place to play professionally because he can shoot it and in volume. And when he's on, he's on. But when he's not, he's not. And we'll see what happens next year. Syracuse looking to keep their true point guard, Judah Mintz. They got the kid from Notre Dame who is actually from Syracuse, New York, to transfer in. So hopefully they can keep Judah Mintz, and they got the kid from Notre Dame.
Well, Dave, I mean, everybody in the country is going to use the portal, but the hard position to get is a great point guard. It's the same thing with a quarterback and same thing with a pitcher in baseball. Those are so coveted, but you got to have obviously other players. You got to have big men. You got to have shooting guard. There's a whole lot that makes a basketball team successful. But
we only need 1 or 2 of those guys. right?
Yeah.
That's the difference
Yeah.
between college basketball and football. I can go get one or two guys, and that
Yeah.
can change the trajectory of my program, at least for that year. Football, you need a little bit more than that, other than a quarterback, right?
Yeah.
I need a left tackle. I might need a guard. I may need a running back. I need a slot receiver, an outside guy. I need a defensive end. I need a middle linebacker. I need a safety. So it's a big difference in basketball when you can add one or two players and be really competitive from the transfer portal.
Yeah, it is. And Dave, you look around, look at UConn's team. They started out one of the top teams in the country, went into a slump in their conference because they didn't lose a single game outside of the Big East this year. And Danny Hurley has been through a lot in his life. Bobby Hurley's brother, their father coached at St. Anthony's, legendary high school coach. That is a story of redemption, a guy that just never, ever quit. Hell of a basketball mind. And I think about remembering those 3 national championships. Jim Calhoun won. Kevin Ollie, one of his players, he won one. UConn, a blue blood. Jim Nance, hey, where are the heavyweights, people ask. Well, you got UConn, but embrace the moment of San Diego State, Florida Atlantic, and Miami. And Miami, look, 2 teams from Dade and Broward County are in the Final Four. Who would have taken those odds? Anybody before the season that would have 2? That's a great story right there.
Is Boca in Broward County?
It might be Palm Beach County.
Yeah, maybe Palm Beach.
Yeah. And also think about the Division II national champion, 36-0, Southeast Florida University. They went 36-0 and won the national championship in Division II. So suddenly, South Florida, not just great. It's always had great athletes, but you could potentially have the Division I and Division II national champions from there. And look at Florida and Florida State, both of them struggling in basketball. But, I mean, Al Golden, he's going to do well, I believe, at Florida. Went barely, maybe close to 500 his first year. And Leonard Hamilton, who's been coaching for 60 years, I think.
Well, he had a bad year. A
bad year.
Rarely happens, but it does. He's a really good coach.
He is a great coach. So, All right, Dave, you look around, isn't this really 32 conferences are eligible to make March Madness? That's 363 teams compared to 131 in Division I to make the college football playoff. This year, of course, 68 teams make the field.
Sure.
Then you look in football, out of those 131 in the 9 years of the playoff, only 14 schools have made it. I just think the interest, I love the college football. Of course I do. But there's no better sporting event, is there, than March Madness because it gets so many more people involved.
I'm with you. We have a couple of Power 5 schools, and we got, 2 Group of 5 schools, although San Diego State's been really good. I did hear this about, why isn't UConn a blue blood? Because basically Jim Calhoun built the program. All those other blue bloods before, their current iteration, were good before then, right? I mean, I know Mike Krzyzewski took over a bad Duke team, but they were good, in the 70s, right? And Kentucky's always been Kentucky, and Kansas has always been Kansas, because, and UConn wasn't. UConn was bad. Before Jim Calhoun got there, UConn was the bottom of the barrel, and he turned it around. And anybody remember Carl Hobbs? They were good. And they are the blue blood. I heard this, they're going to their 6th Final Four, and if they win this, they have 5 national championships. That's pretty good. 5 out of 6. That's kind of like UCLA back in the day. So, in terms of, did you hear about this? People were complaining about the seed. They didn't get the seeding right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that because, FAU should have lost to Memphis, right? I mean, that was an 8-9 matchup, and they should have lost to Memphis. Then they, that Fairleigh Dickinson ball game was a ball game with 3 minutes left. I know they pulled away at the end after a couple of turnovers, but that was a ball game. They weren't blowing them out. And, FAU caught a break. They played Fairleigh Dickinson instead of Purdue. So, that's clutch. Now they played Tennessee, banged up Tennessee team that actually played better against Duke than they did against the Cajuns. And then they took down Kansas State. So that's an impressive win. So it wasn't exactly the most difficult of all paths for FAU to begin with. And then you go actually I did it with my my nephew. We got a podcast out, the Samo Show. If you want to check that out, just me and my 17-year-old nephew talking sports. We were going over who had the hardest paths, and boy, Miami beat a number 1 seed. They beat a number 2 seed, and they beat a number 4 seed. Right? They beat Indiana, Houston, and Texas. That's impressive. All right, that's impressive. Also, by the way, UConn. You mentioned they hadn't lost out of the conference. They started out 14-0, and I think I looked this up with my nephew. I'm not sure they were preseason ranked, or if they were, they were below 20, and they got all the way up to like number 2 or number 3. They started out the season 14-0, and then they finished up like 10-8. How could they be seated any higher than where they were? They were playing 500 ball for the last 2 months of the season, and so they've taken advantage of their situation, but I'm not sure they should have been seated higher than where they were. They were a 4 seed. That's pretty good. That's top 16 in the country. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of people, yesterday was brought up on the show by one of our guests. And it was pretty interesting. I think it was Matt Dean from here in Memphis, coached girls basketball, women's basketball for 16 years at Rhodes, and is very, very connected among a lot of the coaches. And one of his former assistants is the women's head coach at Florida Atlantic. And she said, I've been watching this team all year. And she said, Memphis better be ready because the Florida Atlantic men's team is really good. And then Matt also brought up the fact that Dean Smith had said in the past, years ago, obviously, because he's been gone for a long time, that after the first weekend, they should reseed the teams. That should be considered. I don't even remember hearing that, but I mean, it's obviously true, Matt.
That. I don't really like that.
I don't either. Yeah, it is what it is,
right? So that's the idea. Is FAU benefits from the idea that Fairleigh Dickinson knocked off Purdue.
Yeah,
if you reseed them, kind of like I guess the NFL does, there is no more excitement. And then they're already seeded poorly. Now you're going to hurt them again to reseed them. So I kind of like it the way that it is. And you catch the breaks if somebody else does the dirty work for you.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's any lack of interest because you don't have the quote. I hate that term, the blue bloods, the heavyweights. I mean, I think people do, as much as they love to see a Duke or North Carolina or Kentucky in there, they're also intrigued by the fact that Florida Atlantic, San Diego State, Miami was in the Elite Eight last year. They won the ACC this year with a 15-5 record. I think people are excited when they get into this tournament. Look, people's brackets this year probably are as messed up as they've ever been. I mean, my Final Four was Alabama, Kansas State, Kansas, and Miami. I've got one team left. I don't know what yours
was. I had Houston.
You had Houston. Yeah.
I had those 3 and Houston. Yep.
Yeah. You know, what is it, Dave, about Houston? They're there every year lately as one of the top teams. And I look at them, they play great defense, but Miami just laid the wood to them. 89-75?
Well, that's the problem with those teams is, when you play good defense and you're holding the other team to 55, you're going to be in good shape. You're going to be in every game. And we talked about this with Virginia, right? Virginia's got no room for error because they rarely put up 70 points.
That's a great point.
Back in the day, Rob, when Syracuse played for their national championship 20 years ago, I just remember watching the top 10 and looking at Syracuse thinking they're pretty good. The only team I was afraid of, and they didn't meet them until the end, was Kansas. But even like a team like Oklahoma State, they're like top 5, certainly top 10 throughout the season. I'm like, all you got to do is score 65 or 70 points. Syracuse got into a little bit of a foul trouble with Carmelo Anthony, and Oklahoma State went on a big run at the end of the first half. And I'm like, well, that's the run. They will, a lot like Tennessee, they'll go cold. And when you know it, they went cold. And Syracuse went on to beat them, I think, relatively easily at the end because they when push gets to shove, they have a challenge scoring. In this case, Houston couldn't slow down Miami, and of course Sasser was still banged up. So when you play in those defensive squads, kind of like a San Diego State, you gotta take advantage of when you are scoring hot because they have issues scoring, and there's very little room for error when that happens.
And you look at Texas. There were 3 teams that played. I know Auburn played 13 teams that qualified and went to the NCAA tournament. Other than Auburn, it was Baylor, Kansas, and Texas that played the most teams that went to the NCAA tournament. Let's take a 180, go across the creek. Florida Atlantic, 31-3 at the end of their season before the tournament.
Right.
They had played one school that went to the NCAA tournament. They're not going to be ready. Well, we talked to Bo Carter, our good friend out in Dallas-Fort Worth, and he was at Conference USA tournament. He said Florida Atlantic is a legitimate team, and anybody that takes them lightly is packing their bags and going home early.
Right. The thing is, though, you couldn't seed them high because they're only, they've beaten Florida, right? But they lost to Ole Miss. They lost to UAB, but they had redemption in that conference championship game. So they hadn't really beaten anybody. But the reason I was following them, if just a little bit, is because they played South Alabama earlier in the year and kind of hammered them. And someone who had spent time in South Florida, Mike Jarvis used to be the coach there. I didn't realize how good Florida Atlantic was until, they're like 20-2 and they're like 22nd in the nation, and they keep on moving up because they haven't lost many games, but they didn't beat anybody either, right? They kept on winning ball games, but they're beating up teams in their conference. So again, should they have been seeded higher? What were you going to see them 8th, 7th? I don't think you're going to see them 6th, right? Just because they hadn't beaten anybody. So again, they slide back past Memphis, right? Barely got past Memphis. They very easily could have lost to Memphis, and they've been able to take advantage since.
Hey, hold those thoughts. We're going to take a quick commercial break. Be right back. But this seeding after the first weekend, I mean, that's like redoing your brackets after the first weekend.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go for that. We'll be right back. David Schultz on Sidelines.
Hi, I'm Eleanor Maynard, a 4th-generation residential broker with Hobbs & Realtors. Inventory is still a record low in Memphis, and the demand for more supply is continuing to spread across the Mid-South. Rates are starting to stabilize, which means the number of buyers is picking up daily. If you are interested in taking advantage of today's market, please give me, Eleanor Maynard, your Sidelines Live residential specialist, a call today, and let's discuss your needs. 901-761-1622 or directly on my mobile, 901-219-1905. That's 219-1905.
Hey, David, when you look at all the brackets that were out there, I think to give you an idea how hard it is, and I keep going back to this, after the first day, Thursday, March 16th, of the 20 million and change brackets that were on ESPN's website, people had filled out, there were only 653 that were perfect after that first day. I mean, it's a very hard thing to do. But what we've talked about, you and I have talked about it a lot. You've got a great basketball sports mind, very, very good at seeing through the wall. And that is the teams that have been together for a long time. We all know the portal's out there. We know NIL is a factor. But you look at the number of teams that have been together 4 and 5 years, and I compare that to Arkansas, a super talented team. But as Wes Moore said on the show yesterday, one of our Arkansas reporters on the show, I don't think Eric Musselman will try doing that again. And look at John Calipari. Every year he brings in a great collection of talent, number 1 or 2 in the country. He's got 1 national championship in his 14 years at Kentucky. The ROI is not there. Experience definitely matters. Bringing in a guard or somebody to help you in the portal makes it even stronger.
It was, right? He went to Calipari started off with ball of fire, right? Because he was ahead of everybody else. Now everybody else is doing the same thing he did. So it's not nearly as effective. I thought I heard in his first 5 years, he won a national championship, lost another national championship, and had a perfect season.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty good rate of return right there.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
The thing is now is that everybody else is doing what he's doing. And like you said, the experience sometimes is outweighing the talent. Like are those FAU guards starting on Purdue or the FDU guards starting on Purdue? No, but they've played 4 or 5 years, and the Purdue guards were freshmen. So, although I'm blaming Matt Painter on that loss, that's just, you can't have a 7-4 guy and not get him a shot in the last 9 minutes of the game. But you're right. So the experience, turns out Arkansas is different. They were injured all year long. So, they call it lightning in a bottle to beat the number 1 seed. But also Bill Self wasn't there, right? Yeah. I think we see the difference, and I'd say all due respect, but it is kind of disrespecting him. We see the difference between Bill Self and Norm Roberts. There's a reason that Norm Roberts is not a head coach anymore. Yeah. He is an assistant coach. And I think that if Bill Self was coaching, they would have won that game.
Yeah. I think Bill Self he's a Hall of Fame coach, great coach. But here's another question I'll throw at you. You get to see, I call you the Sultan of the Sunbelt, and there are 32 conferences. In college football, we talk about the Power 5 and the Group of 5. But in basketball, there's, again, 32 conferences. The Big East, you could argue, I thought during the regular season, the Big 12 was the best league. But really, it's the best Power 5 league. But you could argue the Big East was the best league in America this year because Marquette and UConn, Xavier, those are some really strong teams.
Yes, that's true. In the Sunbelt and some other conferences are really hard, one bid leagues. I think Bob Marlin saved his job with the Cajuns by getting to the by winning the tournament and getting to the NCAA tournament. Richie Riley, I think, maybe saved his job by having a good run and getting to the finals. It's really hard in a one bid league. Alabama has, they replaced Alabama lost 2 assistant coaches, one to Georgia Southern and one to Arkansas State. And so there's a lot of pressure that goes with these one bid leagues, right? You do not need, you need to be, you need to have a good season and put yourself in position to try and win a championship. And then you have to have one good weekend, right? Yeah. I mean, James Madison we talked to James Madison and the head coach, who was really good, following their loss to South Alabama. And I said, Coach, you're going to get sick if you watch that film, because some of these shots that Isaiah Moore was making was ridiculous. There's nothing you can do, right? He's making these shots from his hip. And he's like, yeah, I think I'm going to wait a couple of weeks before I watch that film, or else I'm going to drink too. I'm going to drink too much. So, you get one bad ball game, right? I mean, I know we had the bad call with Creighton, but Creighton went 2 for 19. That's ridiculous. From 3. You can't blame a referee when you're an outside shooting team and you go 2 for 19. That's not on the referee. That's on you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you saw
1-point ball game. Make another 3-pointer.
Yeah. I mean, how many times, Dave, have we seen this past season teams shoot 10 or 15% from the free throw line or from 3-point range? Look at Brandon Miller down the stretch.
He was really bad. I think here's what happened, Rob. I think some of that stuff got to him.
Oh, right? I do too.
They put it behind him. It happened in January, and then the other stuff came out in February, and he put it behind him. And then comes the SEC tournament, and now you got the regional and some national media, and then you get the NCAA tournament, and then you get the national media, and I think that started to affect him. I really do. Also, Nate Oates doesn't have a plan B, and that happens when you start missing threes. Should be noted, by the way, I didn't realize this. Nance mentioned this. Jim Nance said that in Miami's comeback, they didn't hit 1 3. They went 28 out of 32 from the free throw line. That's pretty good. Yeah, 28 out of 32 from the free throw line. That's how Miami comes back and beats Texas. They did not hit 1 3-pointer. They kept on going to the bucket. Maybe some fouls, went their way. But, you hit, and that's how they beat them. Texas went 11 out of 15. It was a 7-point game, and they outscored them at the free throw line by 17 points. But Alabama never had a plan B. Was the problem with Alabama when the threes aren't falling? That's a problem.
Yeah, Dave, we're going to bring in you're David Schultz down in Mobile, Dave Tompkins over in Beaufort, South Carolina, up in the Low Country, beautiful, but a Mountain Brook native and West Point grad. But He used to work, be in charge of the Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Derby, and loves the Masters, the Final Four. And so I'm going to bring him in here with you. And Dave, we've had a great conversation with Dave Schultz down in Mobile.
If you think I got Dave Tompkins on and I'm going to talk sports, Dave, I just missed out on an E.H. Taylor single barrel on Saturday. I just missed out on that.
I just had to be professional about that.
I ended up with an Old Forester rye. I'm still not really happy.
Well, count me as one of the most frustrated Alabama basketball fans. The only one more frustrated is my dad. My dad actually played ball for a little bit at Alabama back in the late 50s. But anyway, I've been suffering going back to the C.M. Newton era. It's watching us, have great teams, Wimp Sanderson, get into the Sweet 16 and not have a plan B. And you get deep in the tournament and coaches start to matter more, in my opinion, game coaching, and you got enough time, you can figure out a way to beat Alabama. And that's what the San Diego State coach did, in my opinion.
I mean, they had 2 timeouts. How do you, what is he going to do with those timeouts he had? And I'm looking on an app where the commenters are, well, with the TV timeouts, they got enough timeouts, but it's not like Alabama was tired. No one's complaining that Alabama was tired. You got to call a timeout to stop whatever's going, the role that they're going on. Jeez.
And they've got the deepest team, arguably ever. I mean, their second 5 is, probably the 3rd or 4th most talented team in the tournament.
Yeah. Well, for both of y'all, Alabama's been to the Sweet 16, 10 times, but they hadn't got to the Final Four. And we talked about it yesterday with Matt Dean and Doug Dean, the dueling deans. But Matt, having coached a lot of college basketball, said people forget how hard it is to go to these different venues, and you're going to some much larger venues. When you get to the Final Four, remember when Auburn played there back in April of 19 up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the arena held, and it was packed, 72,000 people at a basketball game. So your depth perception, the rims, and Matt pointed out the NCAA tournament, they give you brand new balls, and the players like them to be a little bit worn. So there's a lot of stuff you can't just say, okay, now we're here, we're a number 1 seed, we're going to coast. That's when it really gets hard, because there is absolutely nowhere to hide. You can't have an off night.
Totally agree. I mean, and what we're seeing, I think the biggest message, or takeaway for a 4 seed to be the highest seed in the Final Four is that every team in the field of 68, and I even include the 16 seeds in the play-in games on Tuesday, they've earned their way to the tournament. I mean, they have good players. On a given night, they can get hot and they can win. And obviously this year's an anomaly to not, to think that, 1 through 4 seeds times 4 regionals, 16 teams, only one of them made it to the Final Four. I mean, that is an anomaly, but I think it's indicative of the tournament and, the great things about the tournament, and maybe some of the not so good things about college basketball that old Chuck Barkley pointed out on 60 Minutes the other night.
Yeah. I like Charles Barkley, never wanted to hold back an opinion. I hope we don't get it to where it's the same 25 or 30 teams.
Yeah, Rob, I got to go, but Barkley is wrong. Okay. Ask about all those. Also, what about all those 5-star guys at A&M? How many are left? Can't get everybody to go to the same team, because in basketball, there's only one ball. So you're not going to be able to get all these guys to go to the same team. So you get all those guys to go to the same team, guess what's going to happen? They're all going to transfer out. So it's not going to be 25 to 30 teams. Basketball is different, and admittedly, basketball is different than football. So far, we haven't seen, I know TCU just got there and Cincinnati was there, but we really haven't seen the effect of, the transfer portal or NIL in football yet, right? I mean, Alabama's still Alabama. Georgia is still Georgia. Ohio State is still Ohio State. And USC is coming back. Now they got Lincoln Riley. I mean, who's the new team? It's still the same guys. It's still the same people in college football with the portal and NIL. And basketball is different because, as we mentioned, you only need 1 or 2 guys to make a huge difference. And I think in this case, Barkley is wrong. I understand what his theory is, but I think his theory is, well, they'll just pay all those guys, and that's not what's going to happen. It's just not.
But Dave, I totally agree with you on that one. But again, you can't
write that one down, Dave. He never agrees with me.
No, I do a lot. That one of my listeners this morning before the show said, I like Schultz. He's kind of edgy and pithy. He goes, I think that's what I like about him, because he loves to box with you, man. But Dave, you're right. And there's no way you can limit 25 to 30 basketball teams. We have 363. It is, almost 3 times as many as we have eligible for the college football playoff. But let's just don't screw it up. That's all. Dave, how do people follow you?
At SchultzyCast. We got a new Sunbelt, Lockdown Sunbelt episode. We had Scott Watkins on from the Sun Herald. Maybe Southern Miss and Will Hall have found their quarterback. More new faces on offense, defense, expectations. And Rob, unlike some other teams in the Sunbelt, Southern Miss has their own unique fan base. They don't really worry about Mississippi State or Ole Miss compared to the Cajuns worrying about LSU or South Alabama, Auburn and Alabama, or even Texas State with everything that they got to deal with, or Arkansas and Arkansas State. And so it is unique to Southern Miss. So looking forward to talking to Scott Watkins, Lockdown Sunbelt.
Looking forward to it. David, thanks so much. Looking forward to having you on again very soon.
Dave, hook me up with an E.H. Taylor single barrel. It's a single barrel.
All right. Pleasure to meet you. Hope to see you soon. All
right. Dave Tompkins, I tell you, Schultz, he is part of Q's Nation from up in New York. He was back home a couple of weeks ago, got caught in yet another big snowstorm up there. But he is, we're talking about Jim Boeheim leaving after 47 years. And now, one of their top players is looking to go into the portal. But, Charles Barkley, I love his honesty and his candor. He was in school at Auburn when I was there. I do love that. But I don't think you can limit it to 25 or 30 teams. But, look, I want my school to be the best in everything. That's all I ask, is that they win the championship in every sport, in everything they do every year. That's all I ask. Other than that, but you're not going to do that. We know that. But Alabama, the fact, if you're an Alabama fan or you're not an Alabama fan, you got to say they had a hell of a year.
Yeah.
It just proves that, you graduated from West Point. Everybody that comes in for the summer program to get you ready for your freshman year at West Point, they're the cream of the crop. Now, how are you going to separate yourself when you get in that environment? There's no place to hide. You can't quit. You can't go home. You just can't do that. I just think when you get into the NCAA tournament, people don't think enough about the different venues. And, you've got the goal, you got the rims, and behind you could be, seats going back another, 150 feet. That's hard to gauge your depth perception. Just think about, from the Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs all those years, those horses can have panic attacks at the line, can't they?
Yeah, well, we talked about that last time, but I think the most provocative thing about the Kentucky Derby is that there's no race like that in the world, and for the 20 horses or 20 plus 20 and change horses that are running every year, that is the only kind of race conditions that they'll run in for their entire career. And they're doing it, in front of 170,000 people. It's super loud. And I think it's a nice analog to playing in the Final Four. We'll credit your school, Auburn, a couple of years ago with in 2019. Yeah, they were not one of the 4 best teams during the regular season. They were not one of the 4 best teams heading into the SEC tournament, but they started the SEC tournament, and in the final 10 minutes against Kentucky in the championship game, they prevailed. And that momentum carried them through. And, were it not for a bogus lack of a double dribble call, I think they win the championship that year. And then, that set the expectations. I switched loyalties and became an Auburn basketball fan over my Tide. And we've been waiting since then for them to repeat that run. And I think they will. Yeah. But that's just how the tournament works. And that's why it is so compelling. And I agree with almost everything Charles Barkley says. But I do disagree that the brand and the entertainment value that is the NCAA March Madness is not going to be diluted through anything NIL, transfer portal, or the like.
Well, and also what he's saying, maybe that's more true if you look at football, but we now have 131 schools eligible for the college football playoff. It's 4 teams. It's going to 12. I like that because I go back to something that Reese Davis said on ESPN Game Day last year. Think about in November when you've got fans in the Deep South locked in. You're going to keep their interest on the Civil War between Oregon and Oregon State. We'll talk about it right after this. I'm going to make a point. More with
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Dave, and when you look at it, again, the interest level, college football fans in the Deep South, early mid-November, they're locking in on the SEC race, the ACC race, Florida State, Clemson fans, Auburn, Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Tennessee, hey, who's going to make the playoff? But you go with a 4 team, you go to a 12 team. I really do think it's going to increase interest. We have John Hartwell on the show with us every week, former AD. He came back in November, having been at Utah State out in Logan for 7.5 years. He's a Mobile native. He talked a lot about San Diego State and Utah State. They both made the tournament, obviously. But he said, San Diego State, watch out for them. Yeah. That coach was one of the guys who recruited some of the Fab Five players.
Yeah, he's the Fab Five recruiter. Yep.
Yeah. And there again, we talked about experience. I'm the only person on either side of my family that didn't serve in the military. But I remember my father-in-law from my first marriage, 26 years in the Army, said it takes about 2 years to pull together to make a combat-ready unit. And sometimes they're pushing them in at 5 and 6 months. He said, not wise. Well, it's team building. Yep. Look at San Diego State. Look at these teams that have built. And when you play Navy in football, you play Army, West Point. When you play Air Force, my friend Tim Horton's on the staff out there with Troy Calhoun. They've only had 2 coaches in the last 41 years. Yeah. Discipline. Yeah, and discipline's a big part of it. But you're never going to get a lack of effort. And then all these guys, when they were in high school that are going to the academies, they were typically multi-sport athletes.
Yep.
And
class presidents and yeah, exactly.
Swimmers, runners, lacrosse players, hockey players, they're your badasses. Then they got to hit that academic routine. I mean, my grandfather went to VMI. Every time I go to Lexington, and you gotta strain. You go by the science and mathematics building. See that big inscription up there? It's discipline. If you can get a team at a place like Alabama, which is what Nick Saban really does, if they buy into a process, you can accomplish anything. Because if you're not tough, Dave, you're not going to make it in this world. You're going to get your ass kicked every day.
Well, I first off on the 12-team playoff, as a Service Academy graduate, I absolutely love it. It has brought the David versus Goliath element into it. Yeah. We on Army's schedule every year, we have a great coach in Jeff Monken. Been to a bunch of bowl games, won won nearly all of our bowl games. And every year we play a Goliath. This year we're going to Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge, and not real, that's a little ominous. But we took Oklahoma to overtime in Norman. We took Michigan to overtime in the Big House. And with that 12-team playoff, I'm going to say once every 4 or 5 years, a service academy will get that number 12 slot, and they'll have to go on the road and I guess play the number 5 team. And who knows, they might win. A service academy winning a national championship, I'd say no chance whatsoever. But to get to the playoff, win a game, that would be so huge for the service academies, for how they market their brand. It's a national brand. It helps with recruiting, not only of athletes, but also of cadets and midshipmen. So we're just super, super excited about the expansion of the playoff. And I have faith that I turned 60 this summer, that in my lifetime, Jeff Monken will get him to the playoffs at least once.
Yeah. I mean, that his brother, everybody knows, Todd Monken, just left Georgia. Very good pedigree there. And I talked to Tim. Tim was on the show a few weeks ago talking about Air Force. They were starting spring practice. He calls it the submarine down there, underground there in Colorado Springs.
Colorado Springs, yep.
The kind of people that you're recruiting, you want those guys also at an SEC school or a Big Ten school. That's what you want, are guys, if you've ever been on a team, you got the guy that says, I'm not feeling it today. Well, I'm going to tell you something. You better find it, because the rest of us are feeling it. And we've all worked our tails off to get to this point. That's why you train your 6, 7, and 8, 9, 10, 11. If you don't train down the roster, the younger ones, when their time comes, they're not going to be speaking the same language.
Next man up. Exactly.
Yeah. It's like next man up. I mean, that's the mentality that you've got to have. And when you look at sports and you look at the great coaches, I love to, when I'm out on my long bike rides or, whatever, and driving, listen to the speeches, the motivation speeches, the great coaches, great leaders, the great thinkers. Bottom line is, what's the most important 6 inches on the field of competition is between your 2 ears. I mean, if you panic and you knuckle under, I have friends and you have friends that have been shot at in hostile environments. They said it's nothing like you ever think. It's a lot of times it's the guy that looks like Woody Allen that's taking, that's kicking ass, and that's just the way it is. And my friends in the
Chapter 1, he adored New York City. It's all out of proportion.
It's all out of proportion. But I remember when friends of mine got back from Panama and Iraq and Afghanistan, I wasn't in the military, but they were. And they said, man, first off, it ain't like the movies. And it's the worst thing you've ever seen. But if you panic, you will not make it. You got to, my brother-in-law, Kurt, 25 years in the Marine Corps. And we were up there at Thanksgiving in his man cave, big Tennessee fan, as my wife is, Vol for life, but we'll excuse that, Dave. And I go in his man cave, and it's pretty awesome. And he's got his Kevlar helmet on a bayonet. And I said, did they give you that for 25 years of service in the United States Marine Corps? And he said, nope. I said, how'd you get it? He goes, I just took it. I said, well, the least that they could do. But there's, you think about people like my brother-in-law, Kurt, like you, the great competitors. You combine the academics, athletics makes men strong, studies make men wise, character makes men great. That's George Petrie, the Auburn Creed. I love that.
I love that.
I look at every time I watch football and I watch the great, look at Kirby Smart at Georgia.
Yeah.
You think it's an accident? Okay, first off, his dad coached him. He was a high school coach. He's from South Georgia. It's just in his DNA, isn't it?
And look what kind of football player he was at Georgia. I mean, he did not start based on talent. He started based on intelligence and character and those 3 pillars you just talked about. And that translated into his coaching career. And look what he did for the University of Alabama, my school, and how his as defensive coordinator, I think 2 or 3 national championships. And, when he went to Georgia, went back home, Mama called him home like Mama called Coach Bryant home way back when. You knew it was a matter of time. And And here we are. I mean, they are. I hate to concede to Georgia, but Georgia is the class of the SEC right now, and I think they're going to maintain that position for some time. But what a run Alabama's had, and we're not done yet either. But really, if you just look at Kirby Smart, the human being, it's no surprise that he's had the success that he's had.
Yeah, and he was there. Mike Bobo was there with him. Will Muschamp. They're all back there together. But you look at the successful coaches; they also know how to manage people. And I think Kirby took a lot of pride. Not that he wouldn't take a guy. Of course, Nick Saban took Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech, who was a Dalton, Georgia native. How Georgia and Alabama, beginning of that, didn't get him. Georgia Tech is a great brand, but Jeff Collins is out. They've got Key as their new coach, who was on the staff that made him the head coach. But Kirby took a lot of pride in that this team was built pretty much organically. And there's some transfer guys. I mean, hell, Jermaine Burton transferred from Georgia after winning the national championship over to Alabama.
They had all the transfers. They had all of the injuries. This year, particularly the wide receivers. One reason why their tight ends figure so prominently in their offense is that they've had riddled with injuries at the wide receiver position, and yet they've won 2 national championships.
Yeah, and they have a quarterback, Stetson Bennett, that they tried to get rid of. The fans just, how are we going to win a national championship with this guy? They did it, and when he was coming back, Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football, he'll be on with us Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Central.
All right.
He tells us he's on with us a lot. He said he was speaking to the Georgia College of Business last summer, and people were asking the question, how are we gonna win with Stetson Bennett? He said many times at the Georgia Florida game down in Jacksonville, people ask him, how are we gonna do it? And he's like, man, what are you asking me? What do you know about football? Stetson Bennett is what, 5'10"? Bryce Young is 5'10". Both of those guys, I think, are going to have outstanding pro careers.
Yep.
They seem like to be. Look, we all know about Stetson Bennett getting liquored up out in Dallas and knocking on somebody's door. Apparently, what happened was he was out and he got the address confused and was, not that I didn't ever do anything that crazy in college.
Cast aspersion on him might be the biggest hypocrite in the world.
Exactly. That's my point. So people, get off of Stetson Bennett, okay? I mean, he was knocking on the door. He was staying with some friends in Dallas. But that guy, I kept saying, why is he not in the Heisman? They gave it to Caleb Williams. He had a lot of stats at Southern Cal. But Stetson Bennett, back-to-back rings. And you could say Bryce Young is the greatest player ever at Alabama, not to win a national championship. But I like what Nick Saban said at Pro Day in Tuscaloosa last week. You're worried about his height and his weight. Go ask the people that played against Bryce Young at Alabama. Go ask them. Next question. I love that.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. And you look at this past year, and we lost in the last play to Tennessee and LSU, but think about that drive against Texas and so many situations in the 2 years that he started where we wouldn't win the game were it not for him. And just what an amazing career, and I can't wait to follow him in the NFL.
Well,
got a funny story for you about leadership.
Yeah.
My beloved alma mater, West Point, they're in a fundraising drive, getting alumni to donate. So now when we get the email, it's sent from not basically the head of our alumni association. It's sent from Coach K. And so we see Mike Krzyzewski, class of 1969, donate. Okay, I think they're gonna get some checks in now.
Yeah. I mean, think about VMI and the Citadel, the academies, the alumni networks that they have are really, really strong. And Coach K was on that staff with Bobby Knight at West Point. And
he played. He was point guard for Coach Knight, and then coached there before he went to Duke.
Yeah, and Dave, Bobby Knight was a great fit. I'm not sure I don't believe in changing and acquiescing and capitulating to the younger generations just to fit in. I love the quote, "You're shrinking to make yourself less, to make other people around you feel less insecure." It is a disservice to you and them. You should always, that's what we love. We love to hate the dynasties, but deep down, we need them. We know we need them. And for people that say otherwise, I will quote Jack Nicholson on the stand in A Few Good Men. "You can't handle the truth. You need me out there." But you know what I'm saying? We and a lot of coaches, when you ask them, maybe I hate them, whatever, but I respect them. You think Auburn and Alabama fans? Let's be honest. I mean, I got, Mallory came on board when I remarried. She's an Alabama graduate. So I got 2 boys, 2 girls, 3 Auburn, 1 Alabama. She's a great person. My wife's evolved for life. That's what makes it so much fun, is that you go to a city like Birmingham. Go to the Monday morning Birmingham Quarterback Club. By far, the greatest.
Mr. Gaston's listening to us right now. Yep.
Right. The mayor of Marbletown, of Sylacauga. But you think about that. It's because we respect each other. But you know what that does? That creates a rivalry for fundraising. They raised $1.6 million. The Monday morning Birmingham Quarterback raised this past year. And that's going to a lot of great local charities. I like Children's Hospital of Alabama. There are so many great causes. And you thank God for people like Hall Thompson and, Hartwell Davis and Jim Gorey, and just so many great people in that club. And it's all that rivalry.
Yeah.
You can use that rivalry for, hey, you think Army and Navy, that rivalry is unparalleled. But you've got friends that are in the Navy. You got to get a boat ride somewhere. That's what they're there for, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. My day job, I invest in startups run by military veterans and have a number of Annapolis grads that I invest in. And Army and Navy love each other. The most important element of that game and that tradition, that rivalry, really is love, and that's the honest truth. Yeah, but it's a hate that only love can understand for those 3 hours that the game's played. So when you're there, typically the game's in Philadelphia. You're in the Portalette line hugging an Annapolis grad, and it's 2 hours before kickoff, and then maybe about 10 minutes before kickoff, something changes inside of you, and that love in turn turns into an intense hate. And you hate for 3 hours until the game's over. And then when you send the alma maters, it's back to love.
Yeah. Well, same thing with any of these rivalries. If you got to think about deep down, if your rival was losing every game and they were 2-9 at the end of the year and you were 11-0, nobody's going to want to watch that. It might be on the late reruns of PBS or something, but what you got to do is you got to worry about your school.
Yeah.
Okay. And take care of that. Control the controllables. You can't control those other schools, but you can control what you have. And Dave, the coolest thing that I'm seeing in the SEC is the surge in basketball. Mike Slive back in 2014. Look, he goes, we got this SEC network coming out, and we've got to put a better product out there. And Kentucky, you know what's happened? Look at Kentucky, and you're right. A lot of talent up there, but now that everybody else in the SEC is pushing, 8 teams made the tournament this year.
Yep.
What do you think? Maybe Cal, I don't like this. I like being, the big fish in the small pond instead of just one of the fish in the ocean.
Well, yeah, I would imagine it'd be interesting to what Coach Cal would say about this. But I say 6 or 7 years ago, when they got into the SEC's regular season schedule, they're probably half the games they could kind of mail it in and win, and then they have to really get ready for the other half the games. That's not the case now. You can lose. You can lose to Missouri.
We're going to take a quick break. I want to come back because I like where you're going with this. Right back with Dave Tompkins.
Hi, I'm Eleanor Maynard, a 4th-generation residential broker with Hobbs & Realtors. Inventory is still a record low in Memphis, and the demand for more supply is continuing to spread across the Mid-South. Rates are starting to stabilize, which means the number of buyers is picking up daily. If you are interested in taking advantage of today's market, please give me, Eleanor Maynard, your Sidelines Live residential specialist, a call today, and let's discuss your needs. 901-761-1622 or directly on my mobile, 901-219-1905. That's 219-1905.
All right, Dave, carry on. You were making some great points going into the break.
Yeah, you think about let's put yourself in the perspective of Kentucky. Still the gold standard of basketball in the SEC, though it is changing. And 8 teams in the tournament, to your point. Alabama, the overall number 1 seed. But when you have to, you can lose to Missouri, you can lose to Arkansas, you can lose to Vanderbilt, you can lose to Mississippi State. You can lose to LSU. You obviously at Alabama and Auburn. I mean, every game is sort of March Madness, tournament conditions pressure now in the SEC, and that's a relatively recent development. And it kind of reminds me of the Big East back in the 80s with Georgetown and Villanova and Providence and. Boy, when you got through that lead, which was a meat grinder, you were absolutely tournament ready, and we're gonna see SEC teams advance further in the tournament. I think as early as next year.
Yeah, and we thought during the regular season, Big 12 was the best, SEC second best of the Power 5, but all said and done, the Big East with Marquette, Xavier, UConn, and Creighton is another Big East team.
Absolutely, yep.
That's an impressive, really impressive group of teams, and I love it. Each school, when the SEC network was launched back in August of 2014, committed at least $5 million to studios to be directly linked up to the SEC network, and it's been an incredible partnership and all. But basketball at the time was really lagging. Of course, last year I think we only had maybe a couple of years ago, 3 teams from the SEC. Again, this year we had 8 teams make it. Mississippi State got knocked out up in Dayton, like a 1-point loss to Pitt. But the Big 12 is really, really strong. Kansas State, Texas, Baylor. God, what a league. And then the SEC had 3 in the Sweet 16. And Tennessee took out Duke. And David, isn't it funny? There's such a narrative out there because Duke has such a pedigree that they're going to get hot, under the new first-year head coach. And Tennessee drilled them and physically just manhandled them. That was a surprise. And then but Florida Atlantic, the team nobody really knew that much about, they've got 35 wins now, 35-3.
I think that's the biggest, to me, the biggest lesson learned so far from the March Madness this year is that it's going to, when you have Florida Atlantic, when you have San Diego State, it's going to give a lot of teams, a lot of mid-major teams hope that they can not only get to the tournament, but can advance, and that they can advance playing their style of basketball. I mean, you don't want to play San Diego State. I mean, those boys are in the weight room 24/7 and they just knock you around. And, and that was Tennessee's brand of basketball as well. And it's just, you're a team like Duke and you like to run and shoot threes, or Alabama. And, it's a meat grinder. And that's going to give a lot of teams a lot of hope, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, we talked about this too, a lot during the regular season. Oscar Tshiebwe at Kentucky, everybody focuses on him because he is such an oddity in today's world. 19 points, 23 rebounds.
Right.
There were 35 or 40 guys 30 years ago. Guys like Charles Barkley.
Yep.
Dennis Rodman, the greatest rebounder of all time, weirder than a football bat, but great basketball player. But you think about going back, these guys that all they wanted to do was get the rebounds. And everybody talks about Charles Barkley. He was not 6'7". He was about 6'4".
6'4", yeah.
He knows how to get his body in there into the mix to get a rebound. And I would say this, that looking at the big picture, if you don't have guys that can rebound on your roster,
Yeah.
you're really going to struggle. And if you shoot a lot of 3-pointers, you're getting a lot of rebounds out on the perimeter. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of players. You can have 13 on scholarship. You're lucky to have 10 or 11. And then you're lucky that they don't go into the portal if you can keep them together. But I think the teams that have stayed together, and with the virus, you got guys. Does anybody ever graduate anymore? That's a question you got to ask. And hey, Dave, I want to introduce you to our next guest, Tommy Kane over in Atlanta, a native of Wilmington, North Carolina. And he was a manager on the basketball team there with Les Robinson when he took over for Jim Valvano. And Tommy ended up playing in the North Carolina State, not Carolina, North Carolina State Wolfpack game against Duke, but also has done a lot of work over the years on ACC Network with ACC Road Trip and Fox Sports, but has a production company in Atlanta. And you talk about why we love basketball. What gets us excited is guys like Tommy, that when his number was called Friday afternoon, hey, man, here's a jersey, kind of like that commercial with Mean Joe Green and the kid, and the Coke.
You're dating yourself now, Rob.
Hey, kid, catch.
Great commercial. Hey, kid, catch. That was one of the greatest commercials of all time.
Thanks, Mean Joe.
Dave lives over in Beaufort, South Carolina. What people call it, Beaufort or Beaufort? It's Beaufort, isn't it?
It's Beaufort in South Carolina, Beaufort in North Carolina.
Yeah.
In the low country, I'll say. Beautiful place down there, though. But Tommy, we're having a hell of a discussion about, the basketball tournament and all, and just how exciting it is. And I mean, it just, this time of year, it gets better every week. And then boom, we have the Masters the next week. And then we're kind of in the desert for a while. So, but there's a lot to talk about, but it's just an awesome time of year, isn't it?
It's a fantastic time of the year. If you ask me, it's the best time of the year. The weather's starting to get warm in the spring, and flowers are blooming, and the tournament's cranking and going. And then I jokingly call it the Jim Nance time of the year. Jim Nance guy, that might be the best gig in all of sports, right? He shows up works for a couple months, does some NCAA tournament games, calls the Final Four, and then he rolls down to Augusta for a week and gets to work there, and then he's pretty much, you don't really hear much from him for the rest of the year. But yeah, this is a great time of the year, guys. I mean, and even if you're not a fan of college basketball, you're just a fan of sports and competition alone, the tournament's got to just get your blood pumping. I mean, looking at the teams that are in the Final Four, I mean, come on, I just was looking through all the brackets this morning of all my people like that invited me to play in their brackets. And I mean, there's not anybody that's got maybe one. Some people picked Miami to jump into the Final Four, and a couple of them, but that's it. Nobody's got all these other teams in there, unless you're a fan or a graduate of San Diego State University or Florida Atlantic, or maybe some UConn folks in there. But it's just awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Tommy, I've got Miami in there, but also had Kansas State, Kansas, and Alabama.
Well, most people did. I mean, most people did. And I think I told you just before, Rob, I did brackets with my two little girls. I got an 8-year-old and 6-year-old, and I have them pick brackets every year to kind of start them early, so to speak. And my oldest was so upset she picked Kansas to win it all. When Kansas got knocked out, I mean, she was crying on the couch, and I was like, oh boy. My wife's looking at me like, what did you do? And I was like, I mean, it's real life. I mean, I was like, she was like, Dad, do you have any right? And I was like, honey, I don't have hardly any of them right. So
yeah, it's hard. And Dave, along the line of what Tommy is saying, it is a great time of year, and we have a lot of great sports writers on here. And Buddy Martin, GatorBaitMedia.com in Ocala, talks about the Final Four. He was sports editor of the New York Daily News, the Denver Post, St. Petersburg Times. He goes, hell, it was great. We'd have the Final Four, and then we'd all drive over to the Masters and raise up. Just this ongoing road trip. But I tell you, Lauren Smith, Lauren, what do you got? Well, Larry, I tell you, it's tough, but I've got to be over in Augusta here for the next 5 or 6 I'll be joining Vern Lundquist for lunch today on the veranda. at the clubhouse. But I talked to Lauren, and Lauren Smith is on the show a lot. Been at Georgia, God, he's a graduate from Wrightsville, been part of the radio network for 51 years. He will be attending his 64th consecutive Masters golf tournament this year.
Wow.
And we had last year he was on every day during the Masters with us covering. It's just incredible. And like, what are you doing today, Larry? He goes, I'll be meeting Vern Lundquist and Fuzzy Zeller. I mean, just an incredible deal. But he's just, that's really who he is. He goes, I went there as a young man, as an 18 or 19-year-old freshman at Georgia, a little old country boy. How they gonna let me in here? And he is part of it. He's written 6 books on the Masters. It is such a special place. And when Vern Lundquist was on our show back in late September, and I asked him, I set him up to say, yes, sir, for Nicklaus's great putt in 86. But I forgot to ask him the question I wanted to ask him the most. Of all the great golfers that you've covered over the years, and you've covered some great ones, at the top of the list, standing alone, should it be Happy Gilmore? Damn, I didn't ask him about that, but Vern Lundquist in that movie, Happy Gilmore, you talk about the great jobs, Tommy.
Yeah.
Jim Nance, Vern Lundquist, and Dave. I mean, and now Dave was in charge of Churchill Downs, the Kentucky Derby, Tommy, for many, many years. So, Dave, give us a little Derby prep, because we're going to have you back on again more times as we get ready for the Kentucky Derby. But
okay, we'll do it. And then unfortunately, I got to scoot after that. But we're 39 days away, and
nobody's keeping track.
We've got 2 big prep races, actually 3 big prep races this weekend. The Florida Derby down at Gulfstream in South Florida, the Arkansas Derby, and sort of a new wrinkle in the last 5 or 6 years, a prep race in the United Kingdom. And the Derby is really becoming a global event. The number 1 rated horse right now is an interesting horse by the name of Two Phils. So I guess that's Phil Mickelson on the PGA Tour and Phil Mickelson on the LIV Tour. The second horse is a horse from Japan, and in the first, I think, 20 rated horses right now, 4 are from Japan, and that didn't exist when I was at Churchill Downs. So it's really becoming a global event. It's great because you got the Final Four, the Masters. You got a couple weeks off, and then the first Saturday of May, we're up in Louisville at Churchill Downs.
Yeah, look, Dave, I know you got a tight schedule, but be back on with us again in the next week, because, again, we don't want to leave out the Derby. That's a whole nother, the Masters, the Derby, the Final Four, and it's getting nice outside. Flowers are blooming, and mosquitoes are coming. But, Dave, awesome stuff today. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Y'all take care.
Take care, Dave.
Tommy, I asked him that question about at the start of the Kentucky Derby. You got, 20 horses out there? Got the blinders on, and horses. I said they can have a panic attack, can't they? So of course they can. They get nervous. You've got a horse that is, my friend, who's big in the dog business. I love to train hunting retrievers and all. One of the smartest dog people I've ever known told me one time. He said, you got all these people out here. My dog's a field champion, or national field champion, or amateur field champion, whatever. Got the great pedigree and all. He goes, remember this. Dogs can't read their pedigrees, but their owners can. You still got to go out there and put the work in. But you know what, Tommy? An interesting bit of trivia here that our good friend Dwayne Allman sent us from Macon, Georgia yesterday. This is the first time ever in the Final Four there's not a single McDonald's All-American. Mm-hmm. And you've got to go back to 1970.
Yep. That's right.
The last time you had 3 of the Final Four teams were first-time ever participants. You think that isn't compelling and intriguing? I'm with Jim Nance. Hey, man, embrace the moment. You've got one, heavy hitter there, UConn, but the other 3 first-time ever. Man, how crazy is it that all 4 of these, especially the 2 South Florida schools, Miami and Florida Atlantic, and San Diego, they're the Beach Boys. It's a great story.
Yeah, it's awesome story. I mean, it is. It's people keep saying, "Oh, nobody's going to watch the games." It's not because no big, the big names like last year we had 4 of the big blue bloods in the, with Carolina and Duke and Villanova and Kansas. But look, I mean, UConn is a blue blood, right? They're a big time school.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, they've got 4 national championships since like 98 or 97 or something like that. So
yeah,
they're a big time school. I mean, Miami's doesn't have really like that history of basketball under San Diego State or neither does Florida Atlantic, but that's what makes sport great. That's what makes this whole thing great. They're all the underdogs going in around. And I really think, I might be wrong because I've been wrong all tournament, but whoever wins the Miami UConn game will probably walk away with the national championship. It would be my guess on that. I think both those teams are just too seasoned. It's got too much firepower, and I don't think either one of them will be shell-shocked with the moment, so to speak, like to get in a national championship game where either San Diego State or Florida Atlantic, I think, might be a little overwhelmed with that whole. But who knows? Who knows? That's why they play the games. And it's just been a great tournament. I mean, there's been so many incredible basketball games that have come down to the last like 15, 20 seconds and, fouls here and there or turnovers or made shots or missed shots. It's been great reality TV. It's been awesome.
It really has. And Jim Larinaga at 73,
right?
Man, incredible story there. Sunday was exactly 17 years ago on this date that he got George Mason into the Final Four. Right. He's taking Miami there. And I just love, they were down 11 points late against Texas. The respirator was on, the priest was in the room. They were calling the kinfolk to the bedside. It did not look good for the Hurricanes.
Right.
They had a lot of pride and they're tough. That's a tough team. You can be a talented team, but if you're not tough, Tommy, that. There are a lot of guys that are talented. They were born on home plate and thought they hit a grand slam. You punch them a couple of times in the face, they may not get back up because they've never had to fight.
Right.
They've always been, whisked along through life. You're bigger, faster, stronger. That'll get you only so far, won't it?
It will. I mean, you got to have that grit. I mean, that's the key to, I think, anybody that's talent can take you but so far, right? I mean, everybody, I won't say everybody because there's the few exceptions with the LeBron Jameses and those people in the world that are just freak athletes, but everybody's at that level is a really good athlete. Everybody in the NBA is a really good athlete. Everybody can put in the hours of practice and shooting, and they can be great shooters. But the great players are the ones that really win all the time, and the ones that just got that innate ability to have that grit to go out there and want to, for lack of a better term, just want to cut your throat and want to win no matter what. They know they're not going to give up. They know they're going to fight to the very last second, and that's what Miami did. And hats off to them, and hats off to Coach Larinaga for instilling that in them and having them believe in each other and going after it.
Hold that thought. We're going to be right back. I got a question about something Dean Smith said years ago right after this.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Tommy, we talked about this earlier in the show before you joined us, but it was brought up yesterday by Matt Dean that Dean Smith years ago had suggested that we should reseed after the first weekend of the tournament. And I don't even remember that, but I think I mean, that's like going back and adjusting your brackets, after the first weekend.
Yeah,
that's silly.
Yeah, that's silly. That's silly. I mean, like the tournament committee has a huge job. I mean, it's almost impossible to try to seed everybody correctly and get them where they are. Just should, like, people keep saying, "Oh, Miami should have definitely been a higher seed." Is that the case? Well, maybe so. But at the end of the day, they've won and they've done what they're supposed to do and won all their games and got to where they want to be. But yeah, I think once you set the bracket, you got to just leave it as is. I mean, it's just that would be just all the people that run the pools it'd be nightmare trying to you couldn't do it. And it's just it's the best sporting event in all of sports, if you ask me, year in and year out. Hopefully the college football will maybe get a little bit that way more so with the playoffs when they expand and everything else and kind of give you that. But in football, we talked about this last week, Rob, is like, it's just not going to happen. The Florida Atlantics of the world are not going to win. They might win a game and maybe sneak one out in an upset. But yeah. I think in football, you're not going to get like a dark horse run all the way through where you'll have like a 9 or 10 seed to win and play for a national championship. It's just not going to happen, I don't think.
Yeah. And look at again, I go back to, and we talked about it. Matt brought it up yesterday. Monty Tao, who lives down in Gainesville now, 5'5" guard, 5'5", on the 1974 national championship team with David Thompson, coached by Norm Sloan. And when Norm Sloan was coaching at Florida, he wore this Madras plaid blazer every time he would get up off of the bench. Everybody'd all sit down, Norm. He was a lot of fun and hell of a coach. But look at what the 1983 Final Four in Albuquerque, Houston, Georgia, NC State. Who was the fourth team? Was it Indiana?
No, it was we beat Georgia, and it was Louisville.
But it was all red, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
All four color in Albuquerque. And look, you cannot, and it's because it's so real. NC State had to win the conference tournament to get there, and they had a bunch of losses, but they won the national championship. They matched up right on game day. On paper, no one gave them a chance. By slamma jamma. They were already sizing their rings.
Oh.
But look at 40 years later, that still resonates. And if you watch that 30 for 30 on ESPN, when those guys get together, Derek Wittenberg, Thurl Bailey, Terry Gannon, all the the realness, that is what a team is. If you're a coach and you're saying, I want you guys to win every game, that's my job, is to prepare you, but also to prepare you for life. But we're going to work you so hard, no matter what happens, you will be a close-knit group of people for the rest of your lives. That's what a team is, isn't it?
That's right, Rob. And you know what? It doesn't exist anymore. It really doesn't. All those guys you just mentioned,
they
didn't transfer in. They didn't come in and to be the third school they played for. They all got recruited to play at NC State. When Coach Valvano came in, he had to re-recruit the kids to make sure they wanted, to keep them around. The Wittenberg and Lowe, the backcourt out of DeMatha High School. And he kept all those guys around, and Big Thurl Bailey, and he kept all those guys played together for years.
Yeah.
And that's what you develop at that league. Now, I mean, there's still some great teams out there that have the camaraderie and do whatever in the friendships, but there's just different when you're talking about a team that's been playing together since the day they walked in as freshmen, and they go and make a run in a national championship like that. There's a brotherhood, a connection, and that is instilled. And unfortunately, we're just losing that in college sports because of the transfer portal. Hell, I mean, yesterday, University of North Carolina, they love their best player. Said he's transferring out of North Carolina. They got another kid that's going out and leaving North Carolina. I mean, who in their right mind would ever leave North Carolina under normal circumstances, right? I mean, it's one of the best of the best in the college basketball every year. So it's just a different world we live in now. But you're right, that unity of the '83 team and Coach Valvano used to always talk about it, is the difference that set them apart from everybody is they all actually loved each other. They loved each other. They weren't just brothers and friends. They loved each other. They cared for each other. They wanted each other, each one of them to succeed. There was no jealousy on the team and anything else. And they gelled at the right time and made a obviously the rest is history. But I just think that's a hard thing to kind of replicate in today's day and age.
Well, you think about when you used to sign a guy, he'll leave here as the all-time leading rusher in school history, all-time point scorer, all-time, home run leader at a school. That was the goal when we came up. And we're not, guys, out in our front lawn yelling at the clouds and get off of my lawn. We're not at all. But I'll tell you right now, I think we're going to see the NIL and the portal, but at least NIL from people that I've talked to. And I don't know what response you get from people, but people I know are like going, man, these guys are already getting a great deal. I've got my pro sports team I follow. I want my college team back. I don't want to have to keep subsidizing these guys and these girls. They're already getting a great deal. I mean, look, right now, it's the law of the land. You got to do it. I understand it. The portal, but aren't you supposed to be? Tommy Tuberville said it best. He goes, we're supposed to be teaching these kids lessons to prepare them for life. My God, what are we preparing them for when we're telling them that every time the wind blows in your face or something doesn't go your way, if your mattress isn't soft enough or your pillow's too hard or the wind's blowing in your face, you can quit.
Right.
This is nuts.
Right. No, I mean, we've talked about this before. It's not a good precedent all the way across the board. Now, look, I mean, I think with the NIL and to me, the NIL, I can kind of wrap my head around a little more and understand a little more side of that than I can the transfer portal. Like the transfer portal to me is a travesty. I think it's just tearing up all college sports. It's just a joke. It's not fair to the universities that recruit the kids and the money and effort they put into recruiting these kids and then have them transfer year to year. They got to continue to recruit their kids that are already on their teams to keep them from going anywhere. I think it's just a travesty. I think that I liked the way it used to be set up that if you wanted to transfer, you had to sit out a year. That's, there's got to be a cost to making your decision and a ramification. But and then if a coach transfers, like if a coach leaves and goes to another job, then yes, the kids should be able to leave and go wherever they want that year. That's not on them because they came to play for the coach. The transfer portal is ruining college sports, in my opinion. Now the NIL deal, look, I mean, there's parts of it I understand, and I just think there needs to be a governing body that really kind of oversees it a little more, with a little more scrutiny and a little more guidelines and rails and guide rails. I just think it's going to get out of control. I mean, I said this the very time I heard about the NIL deal getting passed. I said there's going to be 5 teams in college football every year vying for the national championship in about 10 years, and that's it. That's it. The ones with the deep pockets. Yeah. And how do you not go as a young player want to go to play for Oregon and know that Phil Knight's going to give you a Nike contract, put you up on a billboard, and give you $1 million a year just to play quarterback for Oregon? You're going to form that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just those rich schools that have the huge alumni that can do that kind of stuff are just going to dominate sports. And the Appalachian states of the world, the Georgia states of the world, the smaller colleges that like even the private schools, the Miamis and whatever, they're just going to have a tough time. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. Kids are going to go after the money. That's bottom line.
Well, again, I use his actual hard cases. Frank Duffy on the show with us a lot from over in Atlanta. 3 of his LSU friends that live in Louisiana. He's a New Orleans native, lives in Atlanta, but he's back there back and forth all the time. But 3 of his friends, LSU fans, alumni, business owners in Louisiana, all 3 did NIL deals with LSU players. All 3 of those players had quit by the time they got to the bowl game. Those guys were madder than hell. And they're out. They said, well, I'm not doing that again. And people could be listening going, Rob, we got to have this. Okay, but when you think about it, if you do it right and you work your tail off, you go to class, you go to practice, even if you're on the scout team, when you've got that letter from NC State or LSU or Memphis, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, whatever, people respect it and they'll say, wait a minute, Tommy, you were a manager on the team. You went through all that hell knowing you weren't going to get to play. But when your number did get called, you dressed out and you experienced it. Hell, I'm hiring your ass right now because I know what it's like to have to work hard to try to make it in the business world.
Yeah.
I think the free market, I really do believe this. Back in the late 90s, you can throw darts against the wall. Fifth graders can pick a portfolio of stocks. Who needs a financial advisor? And then March of 2000 came. The NASDAQ was over 5,000. The Dow was over 11,000. Now, man, March 9th of 09, go back to the Dow intraday got down to 6,547. A lot of financial advisors were curled up under their desks in the fetal position, scared to answer the phone. Free market always works this stuff out. I really believe that the fans, what about the fans going into the portal, Tommy? Wouldn't that be funny? It's just, 10,000 of your season ticket holders say, we're transferring, we got a group of us together. We're going to go pull for this other school because we're just tired of this. I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
you got to fight fire with fire.
Right. I mean, what about if the coaches went in the transfer portal all the time? I mean, just like, hey, you know what? I'm going to put my name in the transfer portal and see what all the jobs I can get where, even though I committed to this school. I mean, and I think, Rob, you hit the nail on the head earlier too. I think it just sets a bad precedent for down the road as futures. Like when things aren't going well, what do? You're just going to quit. I mean, if you get a job and you got to deal with clients and stuff like that, and you lose a big account, and all of a sudden, because just because of the nature of the business, you're just going to get up and quit your job and walk away and then try to go find something else, or do you pull your bootstraps up and fight? It's just it's not setting a good precedent across the board. I think it's a shame. The NIL deal, like I said, the schools make a lot of money off the kids and their likeness and things like that. I get it. I think there's got to be some just regulation on it. I've always said, I'm not a genius, and when I'm not an economist, I don't know. I can't tell you what's the best way to do it. But I've always said, like, if a kid comes in as a freshman, you can give him a stipend. If you stay $50,000 a year freshman year, if he stays till sophomore year, you give him $75,000. Stays to his junior year, it's $100,000 or whatever. It stays all 4 years, you give him $150,000. So over the course of his college career, makes almost $250,000.
Yeah.
And then there you're getting a free tuition, which is already about $200,000 nowadays, right? For 4 years of school. And then you get another $250,000 on top for staying with the team. And if that works, then that works. And then you keep kids in school, you give them incentive to stay in school. But this whole junk about just, I don't know, man. I get fired up about it.
Tommy, you're right. Think about Keynesian economic policy. I'm going to call this Kane's system. Like, look at the transfer portal. Go back to October 15th of 2018. That's when it became the law of the land. We're about 4.5 years into the data. Now, I look at trends. I study trends. I look at data in financial markets. I've been doing it almost 32 years. The trend is your friend. I would love to see data to show the number of student athletes in football. I'm not going to name all the sports. Let's say football, that go into the portal that are perpetual orphans. Tommy, there's a certain amount of pride. You made the cut. There's also some humility, when you get cut, but you got to deal with that. There's not a damn thing you can do about it except work harder to make the team. Right.
I got cut my 7th grade year of junior high basketball. My best 3 friends made the team in 7th grade. It was the first time I ever tried out for a school team, and I got cut. Yeah. And I knew I was just as good, if not better, than all 3 of them, and I got cut and didn't make it. Came back next year, made the team, and started the game, and never looked back. I started every game my rest of my career, but I got cut 7th grade year. And I remember thinking that my life, it was humble. My dad said, well, you got 2 options. You can just say that's it, and you want to give up on the God-given talent that you have, or you can go work your butt off and make the team. And I was like, I'm going to choose to work my butt off. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Tommy, think about, didn't Michael Jordan get cut from his high school team?
He did.
You're Michael Jordan. You and MJ.
Well, he got cut from his varsity team. He still played junior varsity. It's a little bit of the misleader of that whole story, but he did get cut from the varsity, but he still played JV basketball for the school at Laney High School in Wilmington. But he got cut from the varsity and played JV. But it's I think that is the stuff that is real world kind of stuff. Like my daughters are now playing soccer at a very young age and whatever. And we lost a couple of days ago. My daughter was pretty upset about everything. And I said, look, hon, it's just whenever you play a sport, two things are going to happen. Maybe in soccer you get a tie, so maybe 3 things. But 2 things: you're going to win or you're going to lose. So when you lose, which is going to happen a lot, you have to then just say to yourself, okay, I'm upset I lost. That's fine. I'm glad if you. I like when kids, get at least upset. That shows you have some passion. But you don't go throwing a temper tantrum. You turn around and you say, okay, what did I learn today by losing that I can do better next time? And every time if you do that, every time you lose, you do a little bit better, 1% better here and there, or whatever. Add that up over a whole season, and you've learned, and you're going to be a better player, and you're going to, your team's going to win more. So, but that's real life stuff. I mean, it's real life stuff every day. You lose, you in your business, you lose a client here and there. It's humble. Like in my business, sometimes when I go to try to do auditions for acting roles and movie roles and stuff like that. I mean, I've auditioned for probably 15 to 20 things a month, and I book maybe one if I'm lucky. So my batting percentage is not Hall of Fame numbers, but that's just the nature of the business, and it's humbling, but you just learn to move on from it, Anyway, it's just.
No, Tommy, it's right though. That's why you're so damn good at what you do. And I think back to, oh my God, spring quarter. When I was in college one time, I bombed a test, and the GA pulled me aside and said, look, don't get mad about it. Do something about it. Come to extra credit. And always remember, I was not allowed to take the elevator from the bottom floor to the top of the Haley Center at Auburn on the 8th floor. I said, why not? My mother said, you can't just punch a button and get to the top. She goes, take the stairs. You'll remember what it takes to get to the top. Also, get your legs pretty damn strong too. As my mother says, have I ever given you any bad advice? Right. She goes, hell no, I haven't. Listen to me. But what you're saying is these great stories about people getting cut. There's just something about it. And you know what? You can't have a pity party, but we're going to be back with a couple of more minutes with Tommy Kane on Sidelines right after this.
And Done, just coming to let you know about our new collection of boots. It's going to be our dress boots. They're the Horsepower collection, and they're genuine exotic leathers and really comfortable. Comes in all different sizes and patterns, so come check them out.
Hi, I'm Eleanor Maynard, a 4th-generation residential broker with Hobbs & Realtors. Inventory is still a record low in Memphis, and the demand for more supply is continuing to spread across the Mid-South. Rates are starting to stabilize, which means the number of buyers is picking up daily. If you are interested in taking advantage of today's market, please give me, Eleanor Maynard, your Sidelines Live residential specialist, a call today, and let's discuss your needs. 901-761-1622 or directly on my mobile, 901-219-1905. That's 219-1905.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Tommy, we got Jordan Hill from 24/7 Sports covers Georgia for us, but I want to say this, Tommy, I know you got to get going, but I think that if they did a study, about 45-50% of the guys in the portal, rather than say I was going to get cut or I wasn't going to be able to keep playing, they go into the portal. So it's kind of a new place to go hide, isn't it? That's kind of what I think it is.
I mean, it kind of is. It's just the easy way out, right? I mean, instead of coming to practice every day and working a little harder, hitting the weight room in the off season, getting yourself bigger, stronger, faster, and trying to earn a spot on the team and more playing time, they're just like, okay, I'm out, and then they go, and we talked about this, excuse me. We talked about this the other day. You just can't develop, I don't think, as a player either. Excuse me. If you don't stick around in the school. You go from one coach to another coach, it's different coaching styles, it's different, atmospheres or whatever. Like, I really think as a player, you're not gonna. The best way to optimize your abilities and whatever is to stick with a program and work your way and learn and work it. That's my opinion. I think the transfer portal is just a joke.
Yeah, and it's gonna be fun. I want to see that data. We'll look for it. Tommy, let people know how they can follow you, and look forward to having you on. Always, you bring great insight, and you're a truth broker. That's what we love about you.
I appreciate you, Rob. I appreciate you. You can follow me at Instagram, Tommy Kane, KANE_talent. And then my production company is Pack 30 Productions, based out of Atlanta, Georgia. Do everything from commercials to, you name it. We can do it for you. Sales videos, anything we do. That's what we do. So thanks, Rob. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. Send us your hyperlink. I'd love to put it out there for you. And we'll talk to you next week.
See you guys.
Okay. All right. Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports, covers Georgia for us. And Jordan, I was actually talking yesterday with a friend of mine over in Memphis about William Norton, who went to Christian Brothers High School, came in, everybody's followed him. And I think he's transferring out to Arizona State in Tempe.
Arizona.
Been at Georgia for what, 4 years?
Yeah, he'd been there a while. Yeah, he's at Arizona, not Arizona.
Arizona. Okay. Tucson. Okay. Yeah. But, if I'm him, I don't know, maybe he gets to play at Arizona, but being part of a program where you've just won 2 national championships, I'm just the kind of person who would say, I'm going to keep fighting and I'm going to get on that field because I'm in sales, man. I mean, just because you're not, you just keep plugging away. But they've got so much talent at Georgia. And I was making a comment to someone yesterday. I said, a lot of schools right now are waiting to see what happens with Gunnar Stockton, Carson Beck, and Brock Vandegrift. And then maybe one of them will come to their school and light it up. But what's going on over there in spring practice with Georgia right now? Because all eyes are watching, can they three-peat? Hadn't been done since Minnesota back in the 30s.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that's kind of crazy to think about. I think this practice today, Tuesday, will essentially be the halfway point of spring. It'll be their 7th practice. And, it goes by really quickly. And I think with the quarterbacks, I've said it on here before, I think this is competition that's going to go further. Really, at this point, I think the biggest thing that I want to see is some of the other positions. And really the big one for me right now is running back, because Kendall Milton, we found out yesterday, dealing with a hamstring, he's going to be shut down for spring. And you're kind of at a position where Dejon Edwards, who was the next guy up, he's been a little limited. He was not going through drills the first time we watched practice this spring. He was back with his teammates at running back the next time the following week. So he's, it looks like he's not quite 100%. You got Branson Robinson. You got Andrew Paul, a guy who tore his ACL last year, still working his way back. He's not going through 11-on-11 tackling drills, and you can understand why. And you got Roderick Robinson, a true freshman. You need some of those guys to step up and see how they can play. I'll have a story go up later today just showing kind of an injury report, a look at some of the guys who've been banged up who haven't gone at all. I think there's a lot of value for these guys who are available to make the most of these practices, getting some of these reps, getting some of these looks. Because, even with guys returning as starters, there's a lot open for grabs, and there's a chance for some of these guys that maybe we don't think about to assert themselves. And if they're able to take advantage and make the most of this time, it could, lead to some real tangible results by the time we get to the fall.
I was watching I think maybe it was Paul Feinbaum's show yesterday, and a question was brought up, and it always comes up. How will Georgia find ways to be motivated with this schedule they have? I mean, that's a question that is silly. I mean, it's because, number one, they have a chance to three-peat. Everybody on that roster knows that. And also they got to deal with Kirby Smart and Will Muschamp. And, Mike Bobo. I mean, that's way out there, isn't it? I mean, I would think the fact that they play for the University of Georgia, that'll motivate them.
Yeah, I mean, they want to win, and I think even more than anything, it kind of goes back to the point, Rob, that you were just talking about with Bill Norton. Those guys understand if they go out there and don't play hard, that there are multiple guys behind them on the depth chart that can be put in there. I mean, I think, it's sort of a cliche to use the iron sharpens iron, but I think that these guys understand, even again, like we were just saying with the guys who started last year, that doesn't mean anything. There's a lot of talent at every one of these positions for Georgia. If the coaches look at a situation, they feel like, man, this guy's just kind of going through the motions. This guy's not really, feeling it. They'll pull him. And last year there were times where guys got pulled, and sometimes that was just a lesson, and then all of a sudden that guy kind of gets things back on track, or sometimes it can open up possibilities for real competition and battles for these positions. So, I do get the standpoint of, what's the marquee game on this schedule? What's the game that's going to get everybody fired up? And, Tennessee, Florida every year, some of those, there's not necessarily a marquee game, but these guys want to go out there and they want to win. And those guys want to be a part of a championship team, and they don't want to be sitting on the sidelines, even if they keep winning. I think that's as much motivation as anything. Is there's so much talent on this roster. If you get caught slipping or just kind of going through the motions, you're probably not going to be on the field for very long.
Yeah, and you know what else gets them going? Their teammates. The fact that they are student athletes on campus, their classmates, their friends, their people back home, people that coached them, Sunday school teachers, scout leaders, whatever. I mean, I sound like witnesses coming into your trial to testify on your behalf, but they play for the University of Georgia, and every game they play, it's not about who they're playing. It's about getting better as a team. That's what coaches, the smart coaches will tell you. Fans look at it. They look at the name. Coaches look at it and say, it's an opportunity for us to get 70 or 80 snaps in real competition. And you start talking about, well, we'll probably try to play everybody on that roster tomorrow. Don't do that. Don't give the other team something to get pissed off about. The fact that you are Georgia, when you play Samford, when you play Vanderbilt, you're going to get their best, just like Alabama does. And if you're not, that's when a surprise, Auburn should be better. The closed for business sign is out of the window. They're back recruiting now. You spent some time there. If you're Auburn, Georgia in this millennium is 17-7 against Auburn. In that series, historically, in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, Auburn won the majority of the games in every one of those decades. You get to 2000 to 2009, when Mark Richt came in, it was Georgia 6, Auburn 4. 2010 to 2019, Georgia 8, Auburn 3. 20, 21, and 22, Georgia 3-0. In that same 23-year period, Auburn versus Alabama, it's 11 for Auburn, 12 for Bama. But most people don't know that. Tuberville got one for the thumb, but you're Georgia. You are, as crazy as it is, people still, is Georgia considered a blue blood of college football? They're the 9th winningest program in the history of college football. Are you a living brain donor to ask these questions? But that kind of stuff ought to motivate them. People even ask stupid questions like that, Jordan. Sorry, I got on a roll. I've been drinking coffee.
You're good. No, I mean, I think it's one of those things, too. Every year when you talk about, these recent years of dominance, you have those guys who have been a part of those teams coming back. Last year it was guys like Stetson, Chris Smith, A.D. Mitchell had played a big role in that. But, you have a few of those guys the following year, but then you got a lot of guys that are just playing new roles. And, I think that we haven't heard it a ton from Kirby to this point because there's been so much off the field that's been talked about. But the marching order essentially that Kirby had last year with the team was, that this team hadn't earned it. That the team, the 2022 team, was not the 2021 team. You thought about everybody who had already gone on to the NFL. You thought about, guys being put in bigger roles. That was the case last year. And I'm sure that's going to be the case again this year. We talked to Cedric Van Pran a couple weeks ago, And what he had said repeatedly was inherited, not earned, talking about the guys coming back and a lot of those guys, the success that Georgia's had and the peak that they're at right now and where they stand among college football's top teams. A lot of the people responsible for that are getting ready to go play on Sundays. So, I think there's a hunger that has been pushed. Another thing that they've really talked about is eating off the floor. We keep hearing, we eat off the floor. It's about being humble and, it's about, not caring what appearances look like, being willing to do whatever to win. Kirby's always been really good at coming up with sayings like, keep chopping, or I think nobody cares was something last year. They're going to find ways to motivate the guys. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah. And really that comes from within if you have to go out there and motivate a guy that's playing at this level at a University of Georgia, you think they won't be fired up? South Carolina is rising. Tennessee's rising. Florida, they got a lot of work to do. Vanderbilt, they closed out with, for them, they got 5 wins last year. Kentucky, I don't know what they'll be, but that was a close game. Who were the closest games last year? Think about it. The Kentucky game in Lexington was what, 16-7 Georgia? I mean, does that not show you that, how do you get motivated? You know what the most important game is? It's the next game, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was basically Missouri and Kentucky were the 2 closest games for Georgia, and until the playoff. Then you had Ohio State that really had Georgia on the ropes. I think it's going to be. I'm really fascinated with the start of Georgia's season, not only because of the competition, which I don't think you can defend it. It's a pretty easy start to the season, but what does that mean for the quarterback competition? How much do we see, both of those guys, Carson Beck, Brock Vandagriff, and we'll see if Gunnar Stockton asserts himself among those two. And what kind of leash are they given? What are they working with on that front? So even though it's not the kind of schedule that you go, oh man, I can't wait for UAB to come to town. It's not going to be something that's necessarily exciting, but there's going to be a lot of storylines to follow. And anytime you have a quarterback competition, you just know you're just kind of really scrutinizing what happens and seeing how those guys play and seeing how those guys react to negative situations. They're going to happen. Nobody's going to go out there and complete every single pass and not throw any interceptions. There's going to be mistakes made. I'm fascinated, even in those early games, just seeing how those guys handle those kind of situations.
Yeah, and people get so caught up, again, in the schedule of who you're playing. Again, it's about, if you're going to Athens, who are you going to watch? Georgia play UAB, yeah, but you're going to watch Georgia play. You're not going there to watch. And God forbid you lose the game, then it's like, why are we playing all these teams? There'll be 92 or 94,000 at every Georgia game next year. It doesn't matter who they're playing. It matters how good Georgia is. That's the most important. That's where people get so caught up in these schedules and they lose track. And then I think about pro day. How big is pro day for guys to go, man, this guy didn't even play that much, but he had a great pro day. Now he might get drafted. I need to stick around here and be part of this program.
Yeah, I think that's something to keep in mind. You even look like a guy like Robert Bill, who stuck around and was always sort of the second outside linebacker behind Nolan Smith. And he performed really well in Indy, performed really well at Pro Day. I think he has a chance to be drafted at some point, maybe 3rd, 4th round, really athletic linebacker. He was a 5-star coming out of high school. And I think even, too, something I was intrigued by at Pro Day was that Stetson Bennett had several of the returning receivers running routes for him. And, Rob, those guys were pretty impressive. Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint made a one-handed catch at one point. You can kind of tell.
I saw that.
People watching were sort of, like some of the NFL scouts were kind of paying attention. So I don't know how much that'll mean for them going forward. But I asked Kirby about that after the fact. And, he didn't put a ton of weight into it other than, hey, these guys have caught passes in kind of tense situations. You're going out there and everybody's looking at you, and Stetson's trying to have a good day to try to help his draft stock. And I'd say it was worthwhile for those guys who participated.
Yeah, and when you look at the measurables, both Stetson Bennett and Bryce Young are 5'10". So, people, Nick Saban said, you're worried about the height and the weight. Ask the people he played against. Did they say that about Stetson? Ask people who played against that guy. He's hard to beat.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated with where he ends up. And, I think we've gotten better as basically a nation who watches football when it comes to evaluating how quarterbacks play in the NFL and sometimes being willing to say they landed in a bad situation. Maybe if Robert Griffin III doesn't go to Washington and everything going on there, they kind of rush him back from injury. Maybe he has a different career. You look at the line of quarterbacks in Cleveland. If Stetson lands somewhere and is given a chance to learn and grow and given the resources he needs, maybe he has a really good career. And I think he's the kind of guy. I like the comparison, not from the playing standpoint, but sort of the career arc. Chase Daniel, the guy who played in Missouri and was in the NFL forever as a backup, started sporadically. I think that's the kind of thing Stetson can do, play in the NFL for, I would say 7-8 years, have a chance to maybe start here and there. I don't think that his best day, he will never be the kind of player where he's the MVP of 2 straight playoff games, like we saw at Georgia. But I think he's got a chance to stick around in the NFL. I think he's super talented. I think he showed that. Just really fascinating to see where he ends up and what kind of opportunities over the next year, 2 years, 3 years he is given wherever he winds up drafted.
Yeah. Hey, look, we've run out of time to love having you on here every week. Tell people how they can follow you. And folks, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world. Don't ever forget it. God bless America. And you need to follow Jordan Davis Hill.
Yeah, dogs247.com, on Twitter at Jordan Davis Hill, on Twitter at dogs247. So we're just about halfway through spring, Rob. It seems like it's been a lot, but it's gone by really quickly. And I have no doubt I'm going to turn around and be getting ready for G-Day on Saturday, April 15th.
All right, it's going to be big, man. Thanks so much. Until then, everybody, have a great day. We are out of here. See you tomorrow.